More than 3,000 years ago, when the desert stretched before the eyes like a motionless ocean, there stood a tent unlike anything the ancient world had ever witnessed. It was not a shelter from the scorching heat, nor a simple resting point for weary travelers. It was described as the exact place where heaven touched the earth, where, according to the accounts, God himself descended to speak with human beings. Its walls were made of the finest fabrics, artistically embroidered with threads of gold. Every piece, every ring, every support, every curtain followed such precise measurements that many scholars compare its structure to a carefully designed code. And yet, this extraordinary tent was assembled and disassembled repeatedly, accompanying a multitude of nearly 2 million people during 40 years of wandering through the desert. And this is where archaeology encounters its greatest enigma. No ancient culture produced anything remotely similar. Not even the Egyptians, with all their splendor, created a portable structure so complex. Why would a nomadic people carry something so elaborate? And even more, why would the Creator choose a tent and not a palace carved in stone to manifest his presence? The answers begin to appear when we examine 3 rarely mentioned secrets: the colors used at the entrance, the measurements of the sacred objects inside it, and the reason why some people simply died when crossing certain boundaries. The tabernacle was no ordinary tent. It was a portable dwelling, a spiritual fortress, and perhaps the greatest architectural enigma ever left by the ancient world. Its courtyard measured approximately 148 feet long, 72 feet wide, and nearly 10 feet high. To grasp its magnitude, it was larger than a modern basketball court, and everything is described with precision in Exodus 27:18. The length of the court shall be 100 cubits, and the width 50 cubits. Each cubit is about 1.5 feet, and the math confirms the monumental size of the structure. But the most astonishing aspect was not its size, it was its construction. Around the courtyard there were no stone walls, but curtains of fine linen hanging from 60 bronze pillars, each about 9 feet tall, set into bronze bases weighing more than 60 pounds each. Exodus 27:10 is meticulous. Its pillars and their sockets shall be of bronze, their hooks and bands shall be of silver. Bronze for the foundation, silver for the details, a brilliance that must have been visible from great distances under the relentless desert sun. Imagine walking through endless dunes and suddenly seeing a great white rectangle shining under the sun, its pillars reflecting light like silent torches. And despite its size, there was only one entrance, a door roughly 30 feet wide, located on the eastern side. Why only one? Why not make access easier? The answer lies in the colors of that door. Exodus 27:16 reveals them: blue, purple, scarlet, and fine twisted linen. Colors extremely rare and costly in antiquity. Purple came from thousands of crushed shells, scarlet from rare insects, and blue from nearly extinct plants. Nothing there was accidental. Everything had spiritual meaning. Each color represented something the visitor needed to understand before crossing that threshold. And upon passing through this entrance, the visual impact was immediate. At the center of the courtyard stood a bronze altar measuring approximately 7.2 feet on each side and 4.2 feet high. Exodus 27:1 states that it was square and hollow, simple inside, but covered in bronze on the outside, gleaming like fire beneath the sun. It was there, before that massive bronze altar, that the daily sacrifices took place. Morning and evening, without interruption, without rest, throughout all the years of the journey. The altar always remained in the same position, exactly between the single entrance and the main tent of the tabernacle. No one, absolutely no one, approached the divine dwelling without first passing by the altar. It was not merely a ritual, it was a constant reminder that no human being could simply enter and exit the presence of God without first acknowledging their own condition. Something had to be offered. One had to recognize their unworthiness. Right behind the altar stood the bronze basin. Exodus 30:18 explains it clearly. It was a place for washing. The priests purified their hands and feet before entering the tent. They washed not for hygiene, but for reverence. The purification was not symbolic. It was mandatory. Only after this did the person approach the central structure, the very tent of the tabernacle. This main tent was made of 45 boards of acacia wood, all overlaid with pure gold. Each board stood approximately 15 feet tall, forming a golden wall that shone intensely under the desert sun. Imagine walking there and seeing those walls reflecting light like mirrors of fire. But what truly drew attention were the 4 layers of covering above it, the first of fine linen embroidered with cherubim, the second of goat hair, the third made of ram skins dyed red, and the outermost of tough hides known as badger skins. 4 layers, each with a purpose. Why so much protection? Because inside that tent was something that could not be touched by rain, scorched by sun, or damaged by wind. Something so precious that it justified all that elaborate engineering. Something one discovered only after entering the first room. Aaron, and only he or the priests authorized, would pass through the curtain and step into a chamber where night never fell. 7 lamps burned without ceasing, casting golden shadows on the walls covered in precious metal. This was the first inner division, the holy place, measuring approximately 30 feet long and 15 feet wide. Only the priests could enter there. The walls, all of acacia wood overlaid with sheets of gold, gleamed to the point of turning the room into a kind of permanent dawn. Exodus 26:29 commands, "And you shall overlay the boards with gold." On the left side stood the most artistic piece in the entire tabernacle, the 7-branched lampstand. Exodus 25:31 describes its construction. "You shall make a lampstand of pure gold. Of beaten gold shall the lampstand be made." Nothing was molded. Every curve, every flower, every detail was hammered by hand from a single block of gold. Exodus 25:39 reveals its weight, 1 talent of pure gold, about 75 pounds, shaped manually. Each of the 7 branches ended in a lamp sculpted like an almond blossom. Exodus 25:33 details it. "On 1 branch shall be 3 cups made, like almond blossoms, with a knob and a flower. And the flames were fed by pure olive oil, as Leviticus 24:2 commands, beaten olive oil to keep the lamps burning continually, without interruption, throughout all the years in the wilderness." On the opposite side, a table also overlaid with gold held 12 loaves, arranged in 2 rows of 6. Leviticus 24:6 explains the arrangement. "And you shall set them in 2 rows, 6 in a row, on the pure table before the Lord." These loaves represented the 12 tribes of Israel and were replaced every Sabbath. The most astonishing detail is that, even under the severe desert heat, they remained fresh throughout the week. And when the new loaves arrived, the previous ones were eaten by the priests. Leviticus 24:9 confirms, "It shall be for Aaron and his sons, for it is most holy to him." Between the table and the lampstand, exactly at the center of the room, stood a smaller altar. Exodus 31 declares its purpose. It was the altar of incense. Made of acacia wood, measuring about 1.5 feet on each side, and completely overlaid with gold, this altar received special incense twice a day. Aaron burned it in the morning and at twilight, filling the air with a fragrance that symbolized the continual prayer of the people. Exodus 30:34 lists the ingredients of the most exclusive perfume of the ancient world: stacte, onycha, galbanum, and pure frankincense. 4 rare aromatic substances mixed in exact proportion. It was a sacred formula, prepared only for use inside the tabernacle, so much so that Exodus 30:37 forbids its reproduction. "You shall not make any for yourselves according to its composition. It shall be holy to you for the Lord." Any attempt to recreate that aroma for personal use was considered profanity. When the incense burned, the smoke rose in a straight line up to the ceiling of the tent, where embroidered cherubim watched, like heavenly sentinels, every movement of the priests. Inside that chamber, there was perpetual light, bread that did not age, exclusive incense, and meticulous rituals operating in perfect synchronicity. All of this inside a windowless room in the middle of a hostile desert. Why such precision? Because every detail was a matter of absolute obedience. Because on the other side of the curtain, something so serious and so sacred was happening that no error was permitted. When the most dreaded moment of the year arrived, the high priest tied a rope around his ankle before entering the next chamber. If anything went wrong and he died, no one was allowed to cross the threshold to retrieve him. It was forbidden. His body would be pulled out by the rope. Leviticus 16:2 describes the danger. Tell Aaron not to enter the sanctuary at any time behind the veil, so that he may not die. Entry was allowed once a year, and only by one man. Any deviation resulted in instant death. The curtain that separated the holy place from the final chamber was a true masterpiece of woven fabric. Exodus 26:31 describes its craftsmanship. You shall make a veil of blue, purple, scarlet, and fine twisted linen with cherubim skillfully worked into it. These were celestial figures embroidered with precious threads, symbolizing real beings who guarded access to the divine presence. Behind that veil stood the Holy of Holies, a perfect cube measuring about 15 feet in each direction. Exodus 26:33 states its purpose. There the Ark of the Testimony would be placed, isolated from the rest of the tabernacle. At the center of that golden cube rested the most valuable and at the same time most dangerous object ever constructed, the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark was a chest of acacia wood measuring approximately 3.67 feet long, 2.19 feet wide, and 2.19 feet tall. Exodus 25:11 commands that it be overlaid with pure gold inside and out, turning the wood into a core encased in layers of precious metal. Covering it was an independent lid called the mercy seat. Exodus 25:17 declares, "You shall make a mercy seat of pure gold, 2.5 cubits long and 1.5 cubits wide, solid gold covering the entire opening. At the ends of that lid were 2 identical sculptures, the golden cherubim." Exodus 25:18 says, "You shall make 2 cherubim of gold, of beaten work shall you make them." They were heavenly creatures shaped by hand, with outstretched wings that touched in the center. Exodus 25:20 describes their posture. Their wings shall spread upward, overshadowing the mercy seat. Their faces shall look toward each other. And exactly in the space between those wings occurred the most extraordinary moment ever recorded in human history. Exodus 25:22 reveals, "There I will meet with you, and I will speak with you from between the 2 cherubim." The voice of God emerged from that invisible point above the ark's lid, between the golden wings. It was there that Moses received instructions, guidance, and judgments. Inside the ark, 3 objects preserved the memory of the wilderness miracles: the stone tablets written by the very finger of God on Sinai, Aaron's almond rod that budded overnight, and a golden jar containing the manna that fed the people for 40 years. These 3 testimonies were the spiritual heart of the nation, tangible reminders that the God who spoke between the cherubim also walked with them through the desert. Hebrews 9:4 confirms what was kept inside that sacred ark: a golden jar holding the manna, Aaron's rod that budded, and the tablets of the covenant. 3 impossible objects to coexist inside a simple wooden box overlaid with gold. They were living reminders of miracles that defied natural laws, and all of them were concentrated inside a space less than 4 feet long and just over 2 feet high. 3 miraculous objects, 13 physical impossibilities, gathered inside a single sacred chest. The divine presence that hovered above that golden cube was so intense that it instantly killed anyone not authorized to approach. The high priest survived only because he followed, with extreme precision, the protocol established in Leviticus 16, the blood of a bull sprinkled upon the mercy seat, incense burned until forming a thick cloud, garments flawless and without defect. One mistake in the sequence, one forgotten detail, one gesture out of order, and the encounter with the sacred would become immediate execution. But why such lethality? What made that chamber so different from every other area of the tabernacle? To understand it, one had to look at the daily routine that unfolded outside those curtains. 4 in the morning in the camp. While 2 million people were still asleep, Aaron was already on his feet. He washed his hands and feet in the bronze basin, put on the sacred garments, and began a routine that would repeat every single day for the next 40 years. No holidays, no breaks, no exceptions. His first task was to remove the ashes that had accumulated on the bronze altar. Leviticus 6:10 commands, "The priest shall put on his linen garment, and he shall take up the ashes to which the fire has reduced the burnt offering." These were the remains of the previous evening's sacrifices, animals that had burned through the entire night. Aaron gathered everything with bronze utensils, cleaning the altar for the new day. Then he lit fresh fire. Leviticus 6:12 declares, "The fire shall be kept burning on the altar. It shall not go out." Even during camp movements, live embers were carried to ensure the flame never died. At 6 in the morning, the regular sacrifices began. Numbers 28:3 specifies, 2 lambs of the first year, without blemish, day by day, for a continual burnt offering. 1 lamb in the morning, another at twilight, every day of the year. Over 365 days that totaled 730 animals in a single yearly cycle, and these were only the mandatory offerings. During the feasts, the numbers increased dramatically. Numbers 29 lists, for example, the offering on the first day of the Feast of Tabernacles, 13 bulls, 2 rams, 14 lambs, 29 animals sacrificed in a single day, and that continued for the entire duration of the feast. While all this activity was happening in the courtyard, inside the tent, Aaron carried out another sequence of duties. In the morning, he inspected the 7-branched lampstand. Some flames went out during the night, and he rekindled them. Exodus 37 describes, "Aaron shall burn fragrant incense on it. Every morning, when he tends the lamps, he shall burn it." There was the individual cleaning of each cup, the refilling with pure oil, and the lighting of the flames. Then came the incense, burned on the golden altar. On Sabbaths, Aaron replaced the 12 loaves of bread on the table, as Leviticus 24:8 establishes. Every Sabbath day, he shall set it in order before the Lord continually. Old loaves removed, new loaves placed in 2 rows of 6, with pure incense on each row. In the afternoon, part of the morning routine was repeated. More incense, more lamp inspection. Another lamb sacrificed. Numbers 28:4 confirms, "The 1 lamb you shall offer in the morning, and the other lamb you shall offer at evening." 2 sacrifices daily, every day, decade after decade. But not everything was predictable. Leviticus describes 5 different types of offerings that could occur at any time: burnt offering, grain offering, peace offering, sin offering, and guilt offering. Each required detailed procedures, specific animals, distinct cuts, and unique destinations for the meat, the blood, and the fat. Nothing was improvised. Nothing was simple. It was this relentless volume of rituals, meticulous, daily, uninterrupted, that explained why entering the Holy of Holies was so dangerous. That chamber was the apex of an entire system that functioned like a divine clock, and any imperfection threatened the entire order. Leviticus 7:37 summarizes the full complexity of the ceremonial system. This is the law of the burnt offering, of the grain offering, of the sin offering, of the guilt offering, of the consecration offering, and of the peace offering. 5 categories, 5 complete manuals Aaron had to master with absolute precision. And behind these laws was a giant logistical structure. Imagine hundreds of animals sacrificed per month, piles of wood required to keep the perpetual fire burning, barrels upon barrels of pure olive oil to fuel the lamps of the menorah, pounds of aromatic incense for the golden altar, sacks of fine flour for the bread of the presence, all transported through the desert in heavy carts pulled by oxen under scorching sun. Maintaining the tabernacle was an unending effort, almost an entire city working to sustain a single point of contact between heaven and earth. But then, something unprecedented happened. For the first time in 500 years, the Ark of the Covenant and the tabernacle were separated. The Ark, the most sacred object of all, was taken to Jerusalem. Meanwhile, the holy tent, along with its altar and utensils, remained in Gibeon, about 8 miles away. The portable system that had worked perfectly in the desert was now fragmented. Everything began when David conquered Jerusalem and decided to bring the Ark into his new capital. 2 Samuel 6:12 records the moment. So David went and brought up the Ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom into the city of David with gladness. The entire city rejoiced, but David did not bring the tent with it. 1 Chronicles 21:29 explains the reason for this separation. For the tabernacle of the Lord, which Moses made in the wilderness, and the altar of burnt offering were at that time on the high place at Gibeon. A strange, almost puzzling choice. Why leave the rest of the sacred furniture behind? The answer becomes clear once we understand what David truly intended to do. He was not planning to keep the portable system forever. Something far greater burned inside his heart. 2 Samuel 7:2 reveals his thought. See now, I dwell in a house of cedar, but the Ark of God dwells within curtains. David wanted to build something permanent, a fixed, solid stone structure, a temple to replace the fragile tent that had accompanied Israel for centuries. Nathan the prophet initially approved the idea. 2 Samuel 7:3 gives his first response, Go, do all that is in your heart, for the Lord is with you. But that same night, God sent a completely different message. 2 Samuel 7:5 contains the divine answer. Go and tell my servant David, thus says the Lord, shall you build me a house to dwell in? The question required no reply. It was a rebuke. God was clearly saying, no. 1 Chronicles 22:8 reveals the reason for the refusal. You have shed much blood and have made great wars. You shall not build a house unto my name, because you have shed much blood upon the earth in my sight. David was a warrior. His hands had held swords, his feet had walked battlefields. The temple, the house of peace, could not be built by a man whose path had been shaped by war. So God revealed who would take on the mission. 1 Chronicles 22:9 identifies the chosen one. Behold, a son shall be born to you, who shall be a man of rest. His name shall be Solomon, and I will give peace and quietness unto Israel in his days. Solomon, the son of peace, would be the one to build the permanent house of the Lord. But David did not sit idle. Knowing he could not build the temple, he decided to prepare everything so his son Solomon would not start from nothing. 1 Chronicles 22:5 records his intention. Solomon, my son is young and inexperienced, and the house that is to be built for the Lord must be exceedingly magnificent, of fame and glory throughout all lands. Therefore, I will make preparation for it. David did more than prepare. He gathered a quantity of resources that surpassed every construction known in the ancient world. 1 Chronicles 22:14 lists the accumulated treasure: 100,000 talents of gold and 1,000,000 talents of silver. Converted to modern values, we are talking about approximately 3,400 tons of gold, 34,000 tons of silver, a wealth so extraordinary that no palace, pyramid, or ziggurat ever came close to matching it. It was enough to build the most expensive structure ever planned in ancient history. When Solomon finally received the mission and began construction, his first act was to restore what had been fragmented during his father's time. 1 Kings 8:4 describes this historic moment. And they brought up the ark of the Lord, and the tabernacle of meeting, and all the holy furnishings that were in the tabernacle. For the first time in decades, The Ark of the Covenant once again stood in the same environment as the other sacred objects, the lampstand, the table of the bread, the altar of incense, all reunited under one roof. But now, the setting had changed. It was no longer a tent exposed to the desert wind, but a monumental structure. 1 Kings 6:2 gives the dimensions of the new building. 60 cubits long, 20 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. Approximately 90 feet long, 30 feet wide, 45 feet tall. In other words, the new temple was 3 times larger than the original tabernacle, built with carved stone, imported cedar, and pure gold, a permanent, immovable, magnificent work. The tabernacle had fulfilled its purpose perfectly. It accompanied the people from the wilderness to the promised land. Now that Israel finally had a permanent home, God also desired a permanent house. The era of mobility had ended. And when we look at this journey, from the simple tent in the desert to the majestic temple in Jerusalem, we understand something profound. God walks with us in the days of wandering, but He also desires to dwell with us when we finally find rest. Each phase has its purpose. Each structure has its mission. And every detail, from the embroidered curtain to the gold of the temple, points to a God who never abandoned His people, neither in the winds of the desert nor in the heart of the holy city. May this story remind you that whether in a tent or in a palace, the presence of the Most High remains the true home of our spirit. Until the next chapter. See you soon.